Because after Notre Dame, he didn't say anything about the players, right? He said we all have to look in the mirror. Players, coaches, staff, we all have to look in the mirror. In the past, we were quick to point fingers. None of that any longer. So you look in the mirror and say, I like what I see. I like how I'm preparing. I like winning. And this is what it takes.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.
Hello, everybody. Here on the All in Sports Network, Ben Peck with a very special guest. It is no other than the voice of the Aggies himself, Mr. Andrew Monaco. So kind to join us during this, bye week for the team on Saturday, but that doesn't mean it's a bye week for, everyone around the program. We've still got a lot to keep track of as we make our way through the season.
It's great to have. Wait a second. That came out really wrong. It's great to have me, right? How could I be any more? Could I be any more egotistical?
It is, though.
It's great to have me. Yeah. So y'all are fortunate to have me. Bye weeks are interesting, aren't they? Because everybody thinks you're off, and I'm not talking about me. Everybody thinks players. No, you're off. To me, it's an interesting time. They'll have this weekend off. But this past week really is a chance to get back to almost like camp. And you really don't I know what Jimbo liked to do was kind of introduce some things that you would see in the second half of the season, but not a lot. Right. It's not all Mississippi State. It's more on yourself. And that's what I think Mike was referring to when he met with us early. It's going to be on us. Clean some things up, get that opportunity, and then you get to Mississippi State. Come Sunday, and then you get back into that week-to-week grind. I really thought what he said was interesting of the first 6 weeks. There's a lot that went into the first 6 weeks, I think, more than just the wins and losses. And I think the bye comes at a good time. So, two of them is going to be completely different, though. I know. Two byes becomes completely different. So, but it's absolutely a fun time. And I was joking with someone earlier this week. I was like, you know what's fun about being on a bye week? That on Saturday, I get to watch the rest of college football's carnage.
Isn't that crazy? It is. It's like we got an early taste of it, Saturday after, the 11 a.m. game. Coach kind of talked about that too. Is like, oh yeah, this is what it's like to be like a normal college football fan. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and Ben, are you surprised that we all get surprised that happens on a Saturday?
I know.
I think we're so caught up in teams that are expected to win, but this is a typical college football. Insert any Saturday. I mean, to me, it's one of the beauties. There's an awful lot that I love about college football. That's one of the beauties is it's not scripted.
Oh, I know. And even, even the games that go the way maybe you expect. I always say this, especially with like college basketball, I think is even more egregious. Like I could tell you the score of a game and maybe that doesn't shock you on its face. But then you're like, no, it's not about that. It's like, wait till you find out how we got here kind of thing.
Right.
Like, it's not just, okay, Miami got a close win over Cal on the road. It was like, no. It's way more interesting than that.
It's like the old Paul Harvey. Now here's the rest of the story.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Man. Well, I was going to ask, instead of just sort of like, early basic takeaways for your first 6 weeks, wanted to ask it like this. After the loss to Notre Dame, that was such a weird game because on one hand, it was competitive, and it didn't feel like deflating by any means, I don't think, from viewing it because they were in it, and you thought Notre Dame, and I still think they are a solid team, but there also wasn't necessarily a ton of things that happened in that game that, like, got you, like, juiced up either. It was kind of like a weird, again, not deflating, but, like, there were, like, not a ton of things to lean on necessarily to get y'all jazzed up for like, hey, once we get this together, we'll be great. Because it did look like it was going to be, at least in certain respects, kind of a slog, a process to get to where you want to be. And I came on here and talked about, listen, I know it was disappointment in terms of what we saw with the offense and especially the passing game there, but, you don't evaluate or judge Colin Klein or Mike Elko based on like one performance. Really what you have to judge these coaches on is how do they respond and adapt and evolve over the course of the season. The problem is if you have the same things show up over and over again, obviously one game in, you can't do that. So I guess I'll ask it this way. What has stood out to you in terms of the team being able to bounce back from that showing? Or again, you did see some good things, but you did have a lot of work to go to where we get to a point, this past Saturday, and you're, blowing out a top 10 team, at least by ranking, at home.
Looking back, Notre Dame to me was along the lines of you don't know what you don't know. And I don't mean that negatively. They didn't know what, not so much to expect. Notre Dame and that defense had been together under Al Golden for 3 years. That was the third year for them. So there was some comfort. I talk about experience an awful lot with teams. It reminds me, the analogy would be, I always liked college basketball teams going into the tournament that had a lot of juniors and seniors who have played together, not just the transfers. They were comfortable with one another. So how do you know how much strain and effort until you go through that against Notre Dame and you're thinking, well, I strained, I efforted, I was grinding, but it wasn't enough. So then when you go to McNeese, and I know it's a different opponent, when you go back in on Monday and say, oh, you know what, this practice is a little bit better, that's where I think the understanding comes in. That's why I think the road win at Florida and the way they won at Florida, and Mike was quick to say we had more strain and effort in that win. Then the light bulb starts shining a little bit brighter. Oh, that's what he's talking about. I'm going to tell you, after Florida, J.B. Moss, baseball player, texts me and says, as an athlete and as a player, I don't know if everybody realizes the importance of that win on the road. Now, for 8 months leading up to the opening kickoff, now it all starts coming to you. That's what the coaches are talking about. That's what Ben, I'll use with you a phrase that I've been using a lot. That work in the dark, all that stuff that doesn't get posted on Instagram, all that lifting that you did that you hated in July, right? Now you're seeing the payoff. Who's that? Le'Veon Moss, right? All of that. I want to be the bellwether back. Oh, but I'm in a room with Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels and E.J. Smith and A.J. Denota and the rest of that group. Reuben goes down. Hate seeing a teammate go down. Okay, it's me. And I love the 1-2 punch. But Le'Veon's in better shape than he's ever been, right? And now he can – the reason why he's doing it is all the work that he did in the dark. And now there's the understanding under a Jay Bateman defense. Oh, this is what we're doing. Oh, this is what you mean by communicating. What did BJ Mays say a couple of Mondays ago? It's not just safeties talking to safeties and the nickels talking to the back end. Now we're all talking. Are there missteps? No one's played the perfect game yet. So You're going to have those big plays. How do you adjust to those? In Arlington, Arkansas takes the lead and you march right down and take the lead back on a touchdown. And then you let your defense handle everything else. You're seeing them stack offense and defense. And I'm a big believer in this. Ben, you can see the joy for one another, not just running backs for running backs, quarterbacks for quarterbacks, safeties for safety. You see this joy for one another. So those are I think the biggest thing is the improvement week to week. And I think the understanding that, okay, we got the win at Bowling Green, but we're not satisfied with that win over Bowling Green.
Right.
And we know we're going to be tested. And as I look back in the first 6 weeks, here's the other thing. Don't those wins at Florida and Arkansas look even better now?
Listen, I saw some people telling me, oh, I don't think Arkansas is very good. I said, listen, I understand they'll probably have some like UAB, like they got slow. And,
sure.
They'll probably have some games like that. But I think if your average play, within the standard deviation is like anywhere for most teams, maybe from a good team from like a B- to a B+. I feel like Arkansas is like their range is like any given play, 3rd and 8, whatever. Jalen Green, it could be an A- to like a C-. But like if you get them at home in a game where they're hitting on all these plays, like it could be that. I had the sense that they could be a dangerous team when they're playing their best. Not sure if they always can, but yeah, totally.
I just think they're more talented. I think they're deeper at wide receiver, which really I think helps Texas A&M against Missouri and more than one. I always thought in the past for Arkansas, man, if you can stop Treylon Burks, which is easier said than done,
right? But
then they always had the tight end, right? They always had something. They had the running back. Now they had that full complement. But I thought in the Arkansas game was, and I talked with Mike before that, because I think every week in the SEC, and I'm not the only one to come up with this, was.
Right.
The SEC is a line of scrimmage league, right?
Right.
And I felt in Arlington, the Aggies won the line of scrimmage. And that's what's going to have to happen the rest of the – and then there was more of that understanding, but not being content with, oh, we got the win, we're good. We keep doing that, we'll be good. Not a chance. And that's what – I sat in Mike's office in August. We're actually recording Ford commercials, right? I don't know if I can say that, but that's what we were doing. But he said, look, I talked to my coaches and I said, here's what's going to happen after Notre Dame. If we win, we're dark horse national championship contenders. And if we lose, Elco's not the guy. Fire the staff, get rid. That's the sports world that we're in. That's what's going to be. It's one or the other. Mm-hmm. But it was the first game of a new program that you have to keep building. But then again, I even think those messages were there. It's a 13-13 game. You're not playing your best. It's still tied, fourth quarter. Okay, how do we get now on the winning side of that? That's what's been impressive, I think, is seeing that improvement. Seeing guys, look, Tyreek Chappelle's a big loss, but seeing BJ Mays, like, that's a great story, right? That's a wonderful story to see. Okay, well, why is Ja'Day Walker not doing great? Well, he dislocated his finger, everyone. You know what I mean? So that's now he's healthy. You have Jaden Hill was battling something, but just getting more comfortable. You can have all the talent you want. Do the pieces fit together? Ben, I'm a big fan of that. There's so many teams we've seen that the puzzle looks great on the box, right? But none of the pieces fit.
Yeah.
You're seeing those pieces start to fit now, and now you're absolutely loving the picture that's there. But you still have to do it piece by piece. I think that's the message for Mike is, yeah, great. We're 5-1. That's in the past. How do we get to 6-1? That's Mississippi State. We all want to look at November 30th, right? We all want to do that. There's a whole lot of games before then.
Right. We can kind of do that, but they can't.
As fans, we always do it. When the schedule comes out in March, it's like, oh, I can't wait for that game and that game and that game and this. And that's a win-loss. You know what I mean? How we do that.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's so funny. And again, being with teams as long as I have, I look at teams as films. It's scene by scene, and then you watch the bigger thing. That's not the world we're in, whether it's sports talk, whether it's social media, everything is immediate. And again, it's the extremes. Best team, NFL week 1. They're going to the Super Bowl, season's over. Right, that's what we forget that it plays out. And I've always said this: no team should be the same in November that they are in September, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a little bit of a clearer picture of how good this team can be if they keep sticking to the recipe.
Totally, and I think the thing too to that end that strikes me is, just with the first year coaching staff, it's like every team gets better. But I think A&M, because of the new staff and everything, has the potential that delta from the end of the year to the beginning of the year, I think was probably more than most teams because of all that adjusting that you talked about. I want to speak on Coach Elko. A couple things. First off, he seems like he's just more comfortable, not necessarily like – I'm sure he was like comfortable in his own skin for a long time, but we saw him come out after the game and defending Connor Weigman. Mm-hmm. We see him kind of ribbing us and having fun at the touchdown club. And I kind of compare it to literally like you're the new guy on the job or your new neighbor. Like you kind of, ease into yourself. At least, people are familiar with Mike Elko, but at least in this new role. And then you start to kind of settle into kind of being, like I said, being more comfortable, at least outward facing. That's just something I've kind of noticed maybe in a little bit over the past couple of weeks. Winning obviously helps. I wanted to ask you sort of about that, but also just more generally. I mean, you were obviously here with defensive coordinator Mike Elko. Mm-hmm. I wonder how you've seen him, I wouldn't say necessarily reinvent himself or change in that sense, but the evolution of Coach Elko from that standpoint to this iteration of Coach Elko, at least maybe what he's able to do in this role that we weren't able to see earlier. What's the biggest thing that stood out to you in that realm?
When he was Jimbo was talking, you got the coordinators at the beginning of the year, but when you go out to practice and you see, and the thing that jumped out at me immediately was the way he related with that defensive side of the ball and how That relationship grew 2018 and what he wanted to implement in 2019. And then it's the same thing, the realization. My thing was, what were his former players saying about when he came back? Mm-hmm. And then it was like, okay, well, I can't talk to just the defensive players. Leon O'Neal Jr. would be one. Damani Richardson would be one. Sam Matthews was one. Mm-hmm. And then it was like, well, wait a second. What about some of the offensive players? So I asked Kellen Mond, and he said, I can't tell you how much he helped me in preparation going up against his defense every single day. He goes, it made me better. Jay Sternberger, the same thing. Although Jay said the problem that I had was I didn't always hear Mike. I just had Tim Brewster yelling at me to get back in there at tight end because Trevor Wood, something had gone wrong. But, but there was that appreciation because you were going up against the best. I asked Mike, I said, you had to go away in order to come back. And what he learned at Duke, here's the other thing. Are you ready for the moment? A lot of coaches say they want to be head coaches and don't know how to be head coaches. He was ready for that moment and had the success at Duke. And I did. I asked him, I said, what's different from being a DC to a coach? He goes, you coach your coaches. He goes, it's Jay Bateman's defense. That's Colin Klein. I trust Adam Cushing. I trust Sean Spencer. That's the thing. I also said, hey, do you like being on the sideline? Because he had been in the booth as a DC and then down on the sideline. He said, I hate to use the CEO, but that's the new phrase, right? But you're coaching your coaches. And that's, you have to have the right staff and trust that. That's what Jimbo had in that initial staff. He had guys like that. You can do it. But until you're through that, you can't do everything as a head coach. But then it's the attention to detail on everything else. I call it a front office, right? The football ops. How magnificently he managed portal in and out, not just in and out. Right. Recruiting, hitting the ground running, all of that, and bringing in this staff. You see that he is comfortable. He likes being the head man. Look, if you notice and this is the difference between great coaches and average coaches. Every great coach does not take any credit for a win, none, and all the blame for a loss. But what he did and said about Connor Weigman, and that was not to the media, that was to message boards and the keyboard warriors, right? That was to them to start all of those rumors unsubstantiated. Now, what does that say to the 84 other players in that locker room? I've got Connor's back. I've got your back as well. And I'm glad he came out and said it. And I'm glad he came out and he qualified it because there was no one in the media taking a shot at Connor. But that's what was happening. And here's the other thing. I think what was left unsaid was you have no idea what's going on in this room or on that practice field. So again, but you know what this is, Ben? This is sliced bread saying $30 million in NIL, and we all ran with it, right? And no one substantiated it. This became personal, though. And I thought after that win, for him to immediately after say what he said about Connor, then to say that about Marcel Reed, what he's saying is Connor's the number one, and Marcel is ready when that moment's there. Every team has a 1 and a 2 and a 3, the way it is, but it's not set in stone. And there was a point during his coach's show when we did Aggie Football Hour, I brought that up to him that because of the talent he brought in and the competition that he has at each spot, and he said, if you look back at Florida, we had a different starting wide receiver than what we had the week before. That's Jabri Barber coming back and being healthy. You look on that back end, not just the Chappelle injury, you're changing there. Des Ricks playing very well. That's not a shot against Javon Thomas. JT's going to play. That's what's going to happen at all the positions, but we just focus on quarterback so much. I think it says a lot about Marcel Reed. Here you are. You might play. You better be ready for Florida. Oh, and here we are before kickoff. Now you're starting. So I was quick to ask Mike, okay, how did he handle now knowing he was starting that? Because it's different. You go in and you're not thinking any longer, right? Now you have all week to think about it. But the preparation of Marcel was there. And I think a lot of people were surprised that Marcel was the number 2. I think we all expected Jalen.
I wasn't shocked, but I was a little surprised.
Right. But and that's the other thing is Mike was able to keep all 3 quarterbacks. That's amazing in this day and age.
Tough to do.
And again, it's that room is so good. Give them a ton of credit of being prepared and supporting one another. That's why teammates play for teammates. That's why this team rallies around Marcel. That's why they rallied around Jalen last year. That's why they rally around Connor when he came back. That's important. That's what goes into being a gamer. Again, in my past life, you would call that kid a pro. We can't do that in college because they're not pros, right? But that's what a pro does. And that's why a pro sticks around a program and has success. That's what's been impressive. And I think that starts from the top. Mm-hmm. And the other thing, Ben, is Mike comes in and knew an awful lot of players. He either coached them or recruited them. Right. So I think that helped with some kind of familiarity. But I'm going to say the same thing for football that I say for baseball and Michael Early. The former players being all in on this hiring and saying, this is what we're getting. We love this hire. I think says an awful lot about his relationships with the former players, especially on the defensive end. And if they're going out of their way to be saying this is a great hire, then that's what it is. Because they know firsthand, if they did not like Mike, they would have said nothing. But there's so much admiration. Leon O'Neal Jr., right? I had a podcast with him, and he's like, I had my plan coming into A&M. Mike had a different plan for me, and Mike was right. And I'm a better person because, not just player, but I'm a better person because of that. And again, it just filtered down. And I think Mike was also able to reach across those practice fields and influence the offense as well, with that voice. But it's completely different being the top guy. Being the head coach is very different. And I think he learned a lot. He won a lot at Duke. And I think that's really helped him. And he's the right guy. He's absolutely the right guy.
All right. We got to get into the Connor Weigman discussion. Specifically, kind of what I tried to ask him, although like we can be a little more honest about it. So listen, I know like in terms of you have an opportunity going into the Mizzou game. Let's just say, previous to that, he's just physically unavailable. I would argue there's a world where you say, listen, if Connor Weigman is not even feeling good enough to even dress out for Arkansas or Bowling Green, you would imagine he's at least limited in practice. Maybe you get one full week of practice where he's able to go at the best case scenario. And then you've got this massive game against Missouri. Now you can, again, it would have been different maybe if he was dressed for Arkansas, but just didn't start. But for him to not even be available there. So then we go through practice. He gets to start against Missouri instead of going through practice and say, you know what? This is a big game. You've only had a week of practice to get into it. How are you going to handle being dropped into live game competition? We can go to Marcel to get through this and give you the bye week, and then Mississippi State be your first game after that. This is where we can be honest. Like, I know each game's important and tough in its own way, but let's be real. Like, you would think Mississippi State, if you're coming into there and there's a little rush you have to knock off, there's maybe a little more wiggle room in that game. But to come in and have the confidence and the trust to put him in that position for a game that could change the narrative of your season, just like you talked about with the Notre Dame game at the beginning of the year. What did that tell you about not only Connor being able to do that, but Mike Elko and the staff having the trust to say, hey, you know what? You don't need all these weeks of practice for us to trust that once you're physically ready, you're going to be able to go in there and get caught up to speed. Just that seemed that part of it was remarkable to me.
Yeah, but he's not sitting on during those weeks. Like, that decision's made. Again, it came down to pain.
Right.
If there's any pain, you're not even practicing, right?
Right.
But he was, and then that game time decision becomes, we're not going to just dress him because we need Marcel, Jalen, then Miles is the third quarterback. Because if we keep Connor, someone's got to be out of that group, or I'm going to be deficient one spot in another place. So he's practicing and he's rehabbing at times as well. But when you get to Missouri week, they're both taking reps with number one. It reminded me an awful lot of camp, where you run quarterbacks this is Monday, Connor's with the ones, Marcel's with the ones, and then or Tuesday, Marcel, and then Jalen's going to run with the ones. Or you go ones and three, your ones and your threes, stuff like that. Now, here's the other decision about Missouri. Missouri's defense played into Connor Weigman's strength.
Yes.
So if you face a pitcher, it's why this pinch hitter owns this pitcher. And I'm not saying Connor's a pinch hitter. You go strength on strength. And the strength, it was more of a strength for Connor. I like something Mike said on Monday. At what point, let's say Marcel wins the Missouri game. Do you keep holding back? At what point do you put Connor back in? Right?
Right.
Let's not forget, Connor's won this job 2 years in a row. Not just this year. He was the number one last year. So there's something there. There's that confidence. Let's not fool ourselves. It's a reason why Mike takes this job, because he knows who he has at quarterback. I'm not saying just Connor. He knows what he has, and it's that comfortability. That here's back to relationships. Connor, you've got to be honest with us. How's the arm? It's not good. I still have pain. The pain went away. Then it becomes, okay, then you go. How are you on Tuesday? How are you on Wednesday? How are you on Thursday? That decision is made on Thursday night. I asked Mike, how'd Marcel take it? And he said, Marcel wants to play. What else would you expect? I don't want someone to be settled to be number two, right?
Yeah, well, that's fine.
That.
That's fine.
And he was ready. Then Friday comes and you see the walkthrough, but there's still that moment that if for any reason any pain comes back on Saturday during warmups, that's what I talk about, the preparation. I think there's this misunderstanding. He's out. He's not doing anything.
Oh, yeah.
None of those are like that. You know what I mean? But I understand. And Mike said very honestly, when is the good time?
Right.
There is no quote unquote good time to do it. Let's say, go back 2 years to Mississippi State, right? We don't win that game because of mistakes. Or it might be longer than that. The Devon A-Chain fumble, and I want to say that's inside the 10. It might be 3 years, right? That fumble inside the 10, the interception, that's not an interception by Antonio John. And you're thinking, why, that's always going to be a pick. Mississippi State's wins, right? So you bring Connor back. He's rusty. You give Mississippi State all this momentum. Now you're forced in where he has to pass now. You know what I mean? Like, that's, I think, Mike's point. Like, when is the good time? This goes back to trust. We trust Connor. But the matchup against Missouri was very much Connor's favor. Those open windows that he threw into, that's Connor Weigman's strength. Very much like Kellen Mond, right? So that was the strength. That also goes into the decision. It wasn't just how's your arm. All of that went into it. If it were a matchup where Marcel would have had the advantage on a defense, then I think that would have made the decision a little more difficult, or it would have been easier on that side. But leading into that. But at a certain point, it was, we've got to have our number one back. Here we go. Back to what Mike said afterwards. Everybody else was creating this controversy of 1 and 2. Marcel Reed has started 3 games. We can't forget that. It's been outstanding what he's done. And I give him even more credit for going back to the Texas Bowl. Get in there. You're not starting, but it was like a start, right? Very much like a start. But you don't have all this going in there. So what he did in that performance was awesome. To be where he is on the depth chart, it speaks so much to Marcel. But was there doubt that, well, we picked the – no, that's what camp was for. That's why you also don't rush Connor back in the spring. Spring doesn't matter. Hate to say that when it comes to what you're going to do in the fall. If someone is injured or hurt, you let them be healthy. You still have the competition in the other spots, but spring is also for new guys coming in. Here's our system. This is your first time to get acclimated to it. Now we can say, I've always said this, those freshmen who become sophomores, they have more of an understanding. They're now going through their second spring. They know what it's about. Those guys coming off injury, those red shirts who didn't play, like that becomes important for spring, not the final of the spring game. That kind of group. Now with a new staff coming in, and this is what we want to do, that becomes important. We all wanted to see Connor throw in the spring, right? We wanted to see if that ankle and that leg would heal up. That wasn't the fun. You're not going to win. You're not going to beat. Is going to come out wrong. No matter what he does, in that spring game in March.
Right.
If he's not healthy, you're not winning that game against Missouri this past Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that what's important, what was important was getting him healthy. So to me, he had to come back at some point. I think the way it worked, and I'm with you, because there's other players that you're going to see at Mississippi State who've been on the sidelines will be ready because that extra week will do them well. What's really nice about Connor coming back is he now has the week to see, okay, how's my arm now?
Right.
Is it bounce back? Are we going to have any other? Because he's taking 60 minutes of tackles and runs and throws, that kind of recovery. It's what we talk about with every injury. Okay, let's see how the recovery is. That's where it works.
Right.
But I think it was strength of Connor, weakness of Miami, or exploit what Missouri doesn't do. I said Miami, what Missouri does not do well. That also plays in to all of that. That's what went into that decision. But I see exactly what you're saying. Do you stay with the hot guy, right? Do you
just for like a really big game? Like, do you like how much you? No, yeah.
Right. No, and then,
I don't want to say rock the boat because, like you said, he's been the guy. But like,
no, but what if Saturday morning Connor says no, it doesn't feel right? Marcel was prepared for that, and that I think becomes the whole thing of people who are saying what they're saying aren't seeing what's happening in that background. So if you're watching Saturday to Saturday, I totally get that. But leading up to the Saturday, even then, leading up to the Saturdays, if Connor could go or was I shouldn't say healthy enough. Let's say there's no soreness or anything like that. Marcel might have been the guy. Connor could have been dressed. That becomes then what do we do? What's best for the roster, and then to win on those Saturdays. But it's a ton of credit to being ready. It's a ton of credit of being honest, right? Mm-hmm. Honest. No, it doesn't feel right. Okay, who gives us our best chance to win? That's when teams come together and trust. And that's the other thing. Connor's right there talking. Marcel has a question. Connor, what are you saying? Not just to Colin Klein, sometimes player to player. That can really, really, same thing he would ask Jalen. You know what I mean? What do you see? What am I missing? What are you seeing? Marcel Reed's going to be a great quarterback, man. He's going to be really good. But I will always say this. There's no better spot in sports than the backup quarterback because it's always what if. It's always what if, and we'll never know.
I always think about it like your 12th starter on offense. I mean, as a Bears fan, I've seen enough season derailed where if that position is not shored up, it's just like, okay, we just have to throw in the white flag. That's not the case for this team.
No. And I'm such a big fan of that competition every day in practice. You know what? It really goes back to what Haynes King said when he won the job. And we know his dad, one of the legendary coaches in Tyler. Just the way Haynes said, I won the job for week one. I love that mentality. I love that mentality. Who's going to be the starter in week two? We'll find out in practice. I do like that. And I think that is what's being instilled. There's no entitlement here. You're going to do it. And I think there's also something to, I'm a big fan of good on good. There's something to Connor having to throw, Marcel having to throw against this defense. I think disrupting the timing of that D-line, like early in camp, that D-line was doing really well. That guy made the offensive line better. You know what I mean? And the timing is different. Okay, Marcel, what are you going to do? That's Nick Scorton coming on your left. You know what I mean? Right. But you're seeing that every Monday. And my feeling, and I made the mistake one time of saying, well, it's easier. I think I said it to Layden Robinson. It makes Saturday easier. And I'm like, maybe easier is not the word. There's no easy Saturday in the SEC, right? But
less of a shock to the system.
Right. We're prepared for that. So in fairness, is Trey Zune going to face any D-end better than Nick Scorton? I don't think so. So that's going to make Trey Zune better. That's where Le'Veon's going to have to find the hole. Or guess what? Shamar Turner's crashing down. Shamar Stewart's crashing down. Right. That's what I really like. And I like how that, again, cliche of iron sharpens iron, but that's what I like about both sides of the football. I think they make each other better. And that competition within your own position group, really, you're seeing the best 11 starting. And there's no guarantee that you're going to start again in the next game. You've got to earn it every practice.
Oh, for sure. I'll get you out a couple more and I'll get you out. We got to talk about the defensive side because I think they've been, especially the jumps they've made in the secondary. I know everyone wants to talk about that front four, but we forget kind of how leaky that secondary I think could be at times last year. You're seeing a few moments, but it's not like these lapses where it's just like stretches of time where you're trying to figure out how to prevent the big play from happening. Maybe just kind of sprinkled in like at the Arkansas game,
right?
First drive, but then after that. But wanna ask you what the biggest like excitement on defense has been for you. I know, and I guess compared to what you expected coming into the year, like we all knew the defensive line was going to be great. Not to say that still can't be your answer, but like, is there any part of the defense, whether it's the line or secondary linebackers, that you come in and seeing how it's working now, 6 games in, you're like, man, I didn't know if we would be able to see that at this point, and it kind of raises the ceiling of that group.
I thought that D-line could be salty. That was the word I kept using. And I thought one big thing was Shamar Turner coming back. Really helped anchor that. Shamar Stewart, the emphasis, I don't think he was satisfied with last year. I can be better. And I love that when you impose your own standards on yourself, and he didn't think he lived up to it. We knew Nick Scorton was good.
Right.
Not sure we knew. We all do this, right? How's it translate to the SEC, right?
Totally.
And the rest of the SEC going, gosh darn it. Great.
Right.
So I work with Dave Elmendorf, right? The safety, right? Who played with the Rams, played with the fearsome foursome, who calls them all by the first name. And he's the one who says you win up front. That front four helps the back seven so much it's not even funny. To that point, Will Lee's been outstanding, just outstanding. Javon Thomas winning the job, and the what Des Ricks has done to earn the starting job, right, this past week, he's really done it. To see Marcus Radcliffe has been outstanding on that back end. Trey Jones is better. Jaden Hill, healthier. I think he was a little dinged in the beginning. I'm not making an excuse, but a little dinged. BJ Mays comes in. I want to be the corner. He doesn't play the first week because he's injured. That is when guys can check out. Well, I'm not playing, so I'm done. Nah. Okay. We need you, and he's all in. You got to not only bring in talent, but talent that fits. Back to the puzzle, right? Back to that puzzle piece. I go back to something, it's a different sport. Coach says to the players, we're starting the season, everybody's in a good mood. Write down on this 3x5 card, how are you going to act when you're not playing and you're not in the lineup? And I'm going to hold this to you the rest. That stayed with me about football. Everybody wants, there's only 11 spots, right? So everybody wants to play. Bryce Anderson moves to safety. Bryce gets hurt, right? He can play on third down, but he's the best at third down. Torian York, first and second down. Someone else comes in on third down, right? I love the pieces that they have. You're seeing they love young fella Rylan Kennedy right there on the edge.
Oh, I know.
They would love to play him more snaps, right? But here's Cassius Howe, who brings something a little bit different. Guess what? Eni White's about to come back. We all forget 6 is going to be back on that field, which makes it even deeper. That front four helps Torian make the tackles and Scooby make the tackles and Solomon DeShields make those tackles. And how good has Sanford been, right? Again, year 1 to year 2, like you're now being able to unleash these guys. And instead of 60 snaps and we're dead in the 4th, we can rotate in. We're fresher. Keep coming. And I love seeing other teams go, this is too hard. This is just too hard. They're too good. That's the imposing the will part. But it starts up front. It absolutely starts up front. Albert Regis, we've always known he's good, right? We've always known that. Rodas Johnson, getting more comfortable. I made the mistake a couple years ago, Ben, of talking with Bobby Brown, and I said, you know what, the defensive tackle, the whole point was, but I used the wrong word. Right. I said, Bobby, it's a kind of an unsexy position. It does so much of the quote-unquote grunt work, right?
You don't always necessarily end up making the big tackle necessarily.
No, but but now look, Nnamdi Madubuike got paid, right? Aaron Donald got paid before he retired. Like you're seeing the importance of it.
Oh, yeah.
But Bobby only heard the unsexy part. He said, look, DTs are sexy, baby. And I said, yeah, they are. And I remember talking to Jimbo and Buddy Johnson had said, man, the work of that line makes the linebackers, makes our job easier. And Jimbo said, he better say that because that's where they're doing all that. Now, here's the problem for SEC offensive lines and running backs. Now that D-line is making those tackles. It's not even getting to that second level. Huge, right? When they're doing that, when you see all those tackles and that disruption and the hurries. And early on it was, wow, we don't have enough sacks. But are we getting the hurries? Are we getting that quarterback off his rhythm? Is the timing different? And Mike said, look, I've been in games where we've had 3 or 4 sacks, but no hurries. And quarterbacks have absolutely carved me up. But there have been other games where maybe 1 sack, but it's constantly the pressure coming. Now you're seeing this D-line impose its will. And I think it gives the rest of that confidence. But I always knew that they did not throw to Jalen Jones' side. It's why Tyreek Chappelle developed as quickly as he did when he was a corner. This is now becoming Will Lee the third, right? You're good. Go ahead. Throw to his side at your own peril. That's going to only make Thomas better and Des Ricks better. That's what I see. I just see that confidence. So what I said earlier about Notre Dame playing under Al Golden's defense and getting comfortable, you're seeing this defense get more and more comfortable. So I asked Mike, can you get to there a little quicker? Because he said 2019 was better than 2018, right? Because they were more familiar. But can you get there a tad quicker? So that's when you see that improvement week to week. Is it going to be perfect? The rules do not benefit the defense. You're always going to have plays like that. But it doesn't. I like the aggressiveness on defense. I love the calls of Jay Bateman. You don't know when they're going to send that pressure. You don't know who's going to be on that pressure. I just love the way they disguise so much. And I just love seeing them come together. But that D-line, I think, has been outstanding and really setting the tone and winning that part of the line of scrimmage. They have shut down some really good runners. And to the point, Missouri they couldn't go to Noel any longer, and they couldn't go to Carroll any longer. 2 really good backs. And when you become one-dimensional, then that defense says, oh, where's my bib? Let me put that bib on.
Look at that chops.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I want to end on this, and you touched on it when we talked about Mike Elko and handling the moment as being the head coach. As we go through this back half of the season, and it's already started a little bit, and it's going to intensify with every week this team keeps winning. About like you said, the scenario if they beat Notre Dame, where a potential college football playoff dark horse, maybe a legitimate SEC title contender. How do you think this team, the makeup of this team, is built to handle that moment and to use that as genuine fuel and not to either get complacent or kind of get scared of their own shadow? Because we've seen all these times. I mean, I look at Missouri on kind of a year-to-year example of Mizzou after what they did last year was in a position where people were taking them seriously and they could have come out and stepped on people's throat, and we start thinking Mizzou in a different realm. Or maybe they regress and we say, oh, we kind of thought they were nice, but now they're kind of going back to maybe what we thought they were. Where do you think this team is in terms of, they've had their one big game, they've had their moments, they're starting to get a little bit of attention, but especially as we mentioned that game on November 30th, whoever that happens to be. And if we ramp up to that and there's a lot of momentum, how do you think this team is built to kind of handle that from a maturity standpoint and just kind of, as Elko said, it's focusing on the 6 inches in front of your face?
Yeah, I thought that was a great line because that's the only thing that you can control. But look, we're talking 18 to 22-year-olds. I think it, and I don't know. I'm going to do what I just railed about, right?
Right.
Did Notre Dame feel all the pats on the back going into Northern Illinois?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. You're good. You're great. To me, with this team, that 6 inches in front of your face, that's all you can control. Former coach said, win your space more times, and the scoreboard's going to say what it says. That's all you can control. To me, this now becomes, for 6 weeks, you knew how you prepared. You now know that on next Monday, if you didn't prepare well, you know the feeling of what it takes to win on a Saturday. If you're not feeling that over the course of the week, you've got to correct it. You're not waiting until the first snap on Saturday to correct it. What can you do? It's the same thing that I felt with Connor after Notre Dame. The footwork wasn't right. Well, if you don't know how to, now he sees it and says, okay, the next time I make a throw like that, I can fix it on the very next throw, right? Like you get it. Again, right. It goes back to I don't know what I don't know. Now you do know. You do know what the preparation took to get to Saturday and a win. I thought one of the bigger wins after beating Alabama was going into Missouri, and that was no contest. I love the way they played and got that road win. Little did I know that was going to be the last true road win before Florida. Right. But that was the measure. That will be the measure at Mississippi State. I don't care who you're playing. How are you going to play that next time after everybody tells you, great? Maybe it's good that everybody's off campus this week. I don't know. There is that. But I think that and I don't think it's just a message, Ben, of week to week during the season. I think that's the message of why Coach has been so quick to say we didn't miss a lift in the summer. Okay, what did you lift for? Feelings like Saturday. That's what you lifted for. That's what all the drudgery is. That's what all the hard work is for. That's the payoff, is that feeling on Saturday. Do you want that feeling? Then this is what it takes to get that feeling. If you're not willing to do this, then don't expect that result. That's the mindset that I think has been instilled from, what would it be, December 29th? What was the first day Mike took over, right? First day after the Texas Bowl. That's the expectation. And I think that is going back to being a pro. That's when you talk standard, if your players have to understand. He says it. This is what we mean by culture. Losing teams throw culture around because it makes them feel good. Winning teams live that culture. I think that becomes what's important from the top man, from that top down from the top man, because he's going to expect the same thing of himself. Because after Notre Dame, he didn't say anything about the players, right? He said we all have to look in the mirror. Players, coaches, staff, we all have to look in the mirror. In the past, we were quick to point fingers. None of that any longer. So you look in the mirror and say, I like what I see. I like how I'm preparing. I like winning. And this is what it takes. And that can only be done. Fans, we can look and say, man, LSU is going to be the blackout game. That's going to be great, right? Right. We love that one. Oh, man, Auburn's going to be tough. Man, we got to go into South Carolina. No, first snap, Mississippi State. Here's what we do if we win the toss. Here's what we do if we defer. Here's how we prepare for that. I really think that mindset is here. And that will be one of the storylines within the storylines when you go to Mississippi State. Are they playing the same way?
Right, for sure. It's almost like you're going to have to put in all that work anyway. You might as well, put in that extra 5-10% to make sure that it's setting up everything that's on the table.
It's a great point. If we're out here for 2 hours, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Yeah. What are we doing for 2 hours? Yeah. Now, the dirty little secret in sports, and I'm not going to say college sports, is, as I said, some teams, you shouldn't be the same team in November that you are in September. Some teams aren't the same. Some teams get worse. The teams that stay the same are the teams that stay the same and get worse are teams who want to play. You know what I mean? And I say that for basketball as well. And there are different circumstances that come into that. Teams could have a ton of injuries, and you've got young guys, and that payoff may be the next season. You know what I mean? Where it's not new to them any longer. This team is not the same going into October 19th against Mississippi State as they were on August 31st in Notre Dame. And I think that is a good thing. And I like that they improve, not just after losses, that they're improving after wins. And that's a really good sign. And Ben, I'll be honest, I think the 12th man absolutely loves that. I think they love the effort and the strain and the grind. I think they love all of that. And that's where, deep shot, Brady Cook never played in Kyle Field. Had he played there 2 games and said, no, it didn't affect us, I totally get it. When you're not there, it's saying Sanford Stadium in Georgia's easy. Florida's easy. If you haven't been there, you don't know. You can say, hey, we're preparing for this, making it as loud as possible on the practice field. I totally get it. I totally get it.
Right.
But you can't pop off about something that you don't know. Had he handled that moment, boy, he looks like Joe Namath, right? Making a guarantee against the Colts. And he is a good quarterback. He's really good. It was A&M's day. They took it. Now, it's Missouri now has to adjust. Now, he can say it will probably be louder at Missouri's practice than Amherst, Massachusetts this
I would
weekend.
say so.
I can be fairly confident he can say that. But it can be and it's not even humbling. And again, it's not like other teams haven't come in and won, but you have to power through that. And look, I even say this, go back to the beginning. Terry Bussey never played in Kyle Field like that. Even the Aggies had to get you. I mean, you feed off it. You're watching that game against Notre Dame, and you're watching the transfers look as if they've been here forever, right? Will Lee is jumping around and getting the 12th man to, get even more fired up than they possibly could be. Once you get it, though, and that to me, like now, for a lot of the players who either haven't played, they love that experience. They loved winning at Florida. They loved winning at Arkansas. To me, that becomes important. Missouri, to your point, yes, the expectations change. That's what teams have to go through. And again, sometimes it's unfair because it's outside expectations. But you're Cotton Bowl champs. Guess what? You're not just Missouri on the schedule. Now you're circled by everybody. Yep. That's a big game. You've got to be ready for that target on your back. You can't always be the hunter. They're now the hunted. How do you handle that situation? It is a big change. You want that number to be smaller next to your college's name and keep rising in the polls. But do you have what it takes to play with that number getting smaller next to your name? That's the key. Even in the course of a season, it changes. Now, Mississippi State, we can make our season if we beat Texas A&M. That's the other thing that happens, right? Now, those kind of challenges change. You can't do anything about Mississippi State's preparation. You can do something about
these coaches, not to say Levy's on the hot seat, but like these coaches that are maybe in a tough spot, that can be sort of a win. They say like Sam Pittman beating Tennessee, you become kind of that game for these teams. So
absolutely. Yes, you do. And you've got to be ready for that.
You freeze down the road. Like that could be a game you circle to say, okay, well, you went off the rails a little bit, but hey, we have something to build on. That
we went in. Cadillac Williams was the interim head coach, and that was one of the worst offensive performances. Auburn was, and that again, same thing. That I was talking because I always talk with the play-by-play guys from other places and where they've been. That's a sneaky, hard place to play. No matter how good Auburn is, they show up every week. That's what I was joking about with our crew about Florida. They're going to show up. Yeah. Gator fans are going to show up. Now they're going to express their displeasure, but they're going to be there to tell you that. But that is the challenge every week in the SEC. Auburn's a sneaky, fun place to watch a game. That's another discussion. But that's totally. To me. But you're exactly right. Now that team did not quit on Cadillac when the Aggies went in there, and that was a very winnable game, and just couldn't get over the top, right? But to your point, that was huge for Cadillac. He stays on the staff, and obviously he's an Auburn legend as well. But to me, it was like, that's what you face. You face those types of challenges more than just being on the opponent's field. All of those things come into play. And to your point, you make a great point. The expectations change even over the course of the season.
Andrew Monaco, voice of the Aggies. Thanks so much for taking some time to talk to us. Well, as I told you, I like the idea of a midseason Monaco. Kind of just check in and seeing how we go through the back half of the schedule. And listen, I know they can't really do it, but man, I got to say, as an outsider, you do start thinking, man, it is, one game at a time, but at the same time, everything that you had, on your plate to play for is still there. And that is exciting to be feeling that this late in the year.
Yeah, I totally agree. We as fans love to dream and scenarios and all of that.
Right.
It is fun as opposed to being 0-6, season's over. When's baseball start?
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. It's fantastic. And going back to the beginning, Mike gets a lot of credit, but I will not discount the effort that these players, that these student athletes have done. I'm very happy for them. Job's not done, but I think they know what it takes.
Absolutely. Well, we salute you for your effort. We know you're one of the hardest working men in College Station as well. Thank you so much for hopping on, Andrew.
Pleasure, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.